on one other topic
Yes.
quickly. The Israeli Prime Minister pushed back against some of your comments from the podium last week on settlements, saying that that criticism goes, quote, against American values.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have any response to that.
Well, I did see the Prime Minister's remarks, and it did seem odd for him to try to defend the actions of his government by saying that our response did not reflect American values. The fact is, American policy has been clear and unchanged under several administrations, both Democrat and Republican. We oppose any unilateral actions that attempt to prejudge final status issues, including the status of Jerusalem. These can only be legitimately determined through direct negotiations between the parties that this president has worked hard to try to facilitate. We would also note that the Prime Minister appeared only to be addressing our concerns about Silwan and seemed to ignore our concern over reports that the Israeli government had moved forward the planning process in the sensitive area of Gavat Hamatos in East Jerusalem. That action is contrary to Israel's stated goal of negotiating a permanent status agreement with the Palestinians, and it would send a very troubling message if they were to proceed with tenders or construction. The fact is, when it comes to American values, it's American values that lend this country's unwavering support to Israel. It's American values that have led us to fight for and secure funding to strengthen Israel's security in tangible ways. It's American values that have led us to fund and build an Iron Dome system that have protected the lives of countless innocent Israeli citizens. It's American values that have led the United States to fully support Israel's right to defend itself, and it's American values that have led us to defend Israel in a variety of international forums, including a variety of United Nations forums. So it's clear how American values dictate, or at least guide, our thinking when it comes to our unwavering support for the nation of Israel. Okay, Roberta.
On Ebola, how seriously is the administration considering additional screening measures at U.S. airports for people coming from Ebola-source countries?
Roberta, I think you may have been here on Friday when we had some experts from across the administration stand here to update you on our efforts when it comes to stopping the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa and continuing to ensure that the American public remains safe from Ebola. At that time, you heard from Lisa Monaco, I believe, the President's top Homeland Security advisor, that the United States continues to be assessing and reassessing the procedures that are in place to safeguard the traveling public around the globe, but also the American public here at home. So we feel good about the measures that are already in place. You heard Ms. Monaco address the fact that the screening measures that are in place in Africa have already prevented dozens of individuals who are exhibiting symptoms of Ebola from boarding an airplane. This is important because, and I can't say this often enough, it's important for people to understand how Ebola is transmitted. An individual cannot get Ebola through the air. It's not like the flu. It's not like getting a cold. Individuals in the United States cannot get Ebola by drinking the water or eating the food here. Ebola can only be transmitted to another individual if that individual has come into close bodily contact with the bodily fluids of an individual that is exhibiting symptoms of Ebola. So that is why our experts continue to be confident that the medical infrastructure that we have in place in this country is sufficient to prevent an Ebola outbreak from occurring.
So as the administration assesses and reassesses measures that may or may not be needed, has the administration absolutely ruled out a travel ban or some sort of travel ban from this area?
This is something that I discussed a little bit on Friday in the gaggle, and I know that it was discussed here in this room on Friday as well. A travel ban is not something that we're currently considering. The reason for that is simply, I think it's twofold. The first is there already is a multi-layered screening protocol in place in our transportation system. There are extensive screening measures on the ground in West Africa where this outbreak has occurred to ensure that individuals that have symptoms of Ebola, in other words, are contagious, cannot board international aircraft. There's guidelines and guidance and training that has been given to flight crews to ensure that they are aware of what the symptoms of Ebola are and can spot individuals who may be suffering from the symptoms of Ebola. There was an incident over the weekend that I know got some public attention about an aircraft that landed at Newark, raising concerns there may be an individual on board who had symptoms of Ebola. Now, it turned out that this individual did not actually have Ebola, but it was an indication that the flight crews were well educated in terms of what they should be on the lookout for. There also is a protocol in place for Customs and Border Patrol officers who are manning our ports of entry to be on the lookout for individuals, again, that may be exhibiting symptoms of Ebola, in other words, that are contagious with Ebola. And you know, we have a lot of confidence in that multi-layered system. At the same time, we continue to assess if additional steps would be useful in enhancing the safety of either the traveling public or the American public here at home. Okay, Michelle?
I guess in a practical sense, when people see this, but then they see what happened in Dallas, the fact that this disease has such a long incubation period, how practically efficacious are these measures that you could take when somebody could just come in and then develop symptoms within the country? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think is going to be most effective, and are you looking to make decisions in the meeting that's going to happen today?
Well, the president is convening a meeting with his with the members of his team who are working on this issue. There's a whole of government approach that this administration is pursuing, and that's why you have seen the Department of Health and Human Services work closely with CDC to lead the effort here in the United States to protect the American people here in the homeland. You've seen the president order the Department of Defense to deploy significant capability and resources into West Africa to serve as a facilitator of the movement of resources and supplies and even individuals who will bring relief to those communities that are affected by Ebola in West Africa. You've also seen USAID take a leading role on the ground in coordinating with international organizations and with local countries in West Africa to confront this outbreak. So there is a whole of government approach that's underway, and the president will be meeting with leaders of those teams to discuss our ongoing efforts. Go ahead.
Okay. No matter how much screening you do, either entering the country or before they board in the originating country, without a travel ban, obviously people could still get into this country with Ebola, and we all know that, right?
Well, that has occurred once since the outbreak first occurred 7 months ago. So what we remain confident in is the medical infrastructure in this country. Again, when I say we, I mean medical experts. It's medical experts who've evaluated exactly how Ebola is transmitted, and those medical experts have determined that there are very specific basic medical protocols that can be applied to contain the spread of Ebola. Now, the tragedy of this situation is that Ebola is rapidly spreading among populations in West Africa who live in countries that don't have that kind of medical infrastructure. And that's why the international response that you're seeing to this situation means providing rather basic supplies. And that is why the Department of Defense can play such a key role in supporting that effort. And what we have actually seen in just the last few weeks since the president committed Pentagon resources to assisting in this effort, that commitment has galvanized the international community. That now that the Department of Defense is invested in providing logistical support to response efforts on the ground, we're seeing international organizations and countries around the world pledge additional resources and additional personnel to support the effort to contain this outbreak. The other thing that you heard from Dr. Frieden, the director of the Centers for Disease Control, is that the way that we will solve this problem is by confronting Ebola at the source. And that's why you're seeing so much time and attention and resources be dedicated to trying to meet the needs of those individuals in these communities in West Africa.
Okay, so just to be clear, the fact that people can still come here from those countries and they can possibly be infected, the administration sees that risk as small enough and our medical response as good enough that that's a risk we're willing to take.
Well, I think what you've heard Dr. Frieden say is that risk is exceedingly low, that the risk of an Ebola outbreak in the United States is exceedingly low. And again, there are a variety of reasons for that. The first is that specifically there's only, that our medical professionals have assessed there's only, that it's very clear how one contracts Ebola. And that's by coming into close contact with the bodily fluids of an individual that already has the symptoms of Ebola. So it's not like the flu, it's not like catching a cold. It's not transmitted through the food and water here in the United States. So what that means is if you have a basic medical infrastructure in place and the protocol is properly applied, we can act quickly to contain and isolate those individuals who are exhibiting symptoms and limit their ability to limit the disease's ability to spread. Okay.
If you don't mind, can I ask about one more thing? This 19-year-old guy from Illinois who was arrested today wanting to go to Syria. Are you aware of that?
I'm actually not. Michelle, maybe we can follow up with you after the briefing.
Okay, and I also wanted to clarify what you answered to Julie Pace about Biden's comments. Were you saying that the apology really sprang from the characterization of what went on in a private conversation versus the substance of his comments in general?
Well, those two things aren't related because the substance of his comments are related directly to a private conversation that he's had with President Erdogan.
But you really